Folks, we're back. This is Steve Sanchez, Jim Johnson, with another episode of Veterans in Politics. Today, our guest is Ryan Binkley, candidate for United States President of the Candidate for President of the United States. But before we get to Mr. Binkley, Jim, you have any rants?
No, actually, I don't have any rants. I'm actually super excited to get to Mr. Binkley because first question I'm going to have for him is like, who wants to run for president? You take all the
They're
blame.
arresting them now.
I know.
Throwing them in jail.
You take all the blame. You don't get any credit.
No immunity anymore.
Nah, I'm just.
But judges have immunity.
I'm just
How come
excited.
the president can't get immunity?
I'm excited and very thankful that somebody that's running for president wants to come on our show. I greatly appreciate that. We've interviewed plenty of
presidential
candidates over
John
the years.
McCain, he's my favorite.
Yeah,
that's great.
That's
great. Well, it's great to be with you guys.
Rest his soul. Rest his soul.
Rest his soul. Yeah, rest his soul. Yeah, it was pretty interesting the answer he had when I asked him, "Hey, how about that savings and loan scandal?" He didn't like that too much.
Which one?
Which one? Right. Exactly.
Mr. Binkley. Did I pronounce your name correctly?
Yes, Binkley.
Binkley.
Yes.
Could you please tell us about yourself?
Yes.
Who are you?
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
I really do appreciate the opportunity to be here. And I am Brian Binkley. I'm a pastor. I'm a CEO of a business called Generational Group. We do, on the business side of my life, I do investment banking, which for us is middle market, mergers and acquisitions, sell-side services. So if you know a business owner that wants to sell his business one day, we are the company that does that. We do it nationwide and in Canada. My dad and I started that about 20 years ago. And we created a marketing model, I would call it, for deal makers to help them have more deal flow. And it took off. And now we have about 350 employees, 16 offices. My wife and I, Ellie, we've been married for 25 years. We've got 5 kids.
Tell us about her.
Ellie, she is amazing. She's the gift of my life. Here. She is, Ellie is, she's my best friend. She is my wife. She's probably one of the most godly women, kind person, strong person, that I've ever known. She is first generation immigrant from South Korea. Her dad is still alive. He's 93. He was an interpreter for General Trudeau in the Korean conflict. Waited 15 years to come here. And Ellie came here, oddly enough, when she was about 8. She never really met her mom or dad until she was about 8. They left her with her grandmother until she passed in Korea. And that's not necessarily uncommon back in those days because they were coming here to fight, open up a business, and she was a surprise baby. And so,
I know about those.
And anyway, so she came here, and hopefully not too many, right? But she came here when she was 8, and so we met in our mid-20s. I took a job transfer to Atlanta, Georgia, with Boston Scientific in the mid-90s, and that's where we met. I'm from Dallas, Texas, but so I'm a business guy, and I'm also a pastor. So my wife and I, we felt a call to ministry in the 90s, and we actually left corporate America and came to work at a church in 1999 and was doing inner city ministry in Atlanta, young adult ministry. We had a young adult ministry training school, and then a tragedy hit my home. My brother was running my older brother by 2 years was running a small business with my dad, and he was killed by a drunk driver on MLK Day, 2001.
Wow.
And so we prayed and felt like God was leading us to...
How old was he when
he was 35.
Oh, that's young.
Yeah, it was it's a huge tragedy to lose a parent or a spouse or even a sibling. But when you're watching your parents lose a child, I don't know if you've ever known anybody or if you haven't, but it's unnatural. And so, I watched my family walk through, an incredible tragedy. But, as it worked out in our life, we started a business. I went back, got my MBA from SMU in Dallas, and we started a new company together. My wife and I continued to do ministry. We did young adult ministry for another 10 years. Then we started a church 10 years ago. So we've got a business now, that's grown, and we've got a church, a growing community. Both of these are in a town called Richardson, Texas, which is a city in Dallas County. It's 10 minutes from downtown Dallas. So that's what we've been doing. And about 8 years ago, I started feeling the call to run for president of the United States of America. as all the ways that God would speak to us in different ways, he began speaking to me about that. And I just kept hearing it over and over. And I put my hat in the ring back in April. And so we've been a grassroots candidate really since April, focused a lot on Iowa. Came out, started in 15th place, went to 5th place, and went to New Hampshire, came here, and sharing our message. And so it's great to be with you to do just that.
You ran a Republican ticket.
Absolutely.
Against Donald Trump.
Yes, sir.
How do you feel about that?
Well, I tell people, my message is a little bit different. First of all, I support President Trump in many ways. I mean, I supported him in 2016. I took 16 people to his inauguration, and I supported him in 2020. And I'm not running because I don't like him or like his platform. I actually thought he was going to win in 2020, and I'd already decided to run because I felt like I was called to. Mm-hmm. So I'm in this race because I feel like God has given me a message for our country.
Right.
And I feel like there's some things that he has talked to me about that our country's facing and will face soon that's not being addressed. And we can dive into some of those things. But it has a lot to do with the economic status of our country as well as the cultural divide in our nation. And I feel like I'm supposed to speak to it. And so how this works out, it's always been a slingshot in the hand of God. It's always been a miracle. But I feel really called to speak to it because if we don't do something about the division and the debt we face, I think we're going to set the next generation up for probably the weakest economic foundation since the Great Depression. And I think there's a cultural divide that will be almost, hard to repair unless we do something big to change it.
So the mortgage interest rate is around 5, sometimes 8%. Mm-hmm. As president, what are you going to do about that?
Well, I think we have to look back. So I'm kind of a finance guy. I'll look back in the history of time here. 4 or 5 or 6% interest rates, no big deal. What's a big deal is when we've had a monetary policy from the Fed that's kept zero interest rates for 15 years. That's what's not normal. It's not normal, really, to have interest rates on mortgages at 2.9%. If you go back last 100 years, that's really abnormal. That's really not even healthy. When you put your money in a savings account and earn 0% interest on it. So what that does is that creates a debtor society, meaning it's more important for us to borrow more money for homes that we really can't afford and to go into more debt to buy businesses and to use debt instead of cash because cash is worth, nothing. So we use it that way. So it's not that 4 or 5% is that bad. It should be a little bit lower. But coming off 15 years of history of having free money, that's the problem. So the Fed actually did us no favors for 15 years by running a quantitative easing. So now we're entering a new season. I would call it quantitative tightening, which nobody likes. But it's not necessarily Biden's fault. This is 30 years in a row of deficit spending. $34 trillion of debt didn't happen overnight. It's happened over, 15 trillion happened in the last 7 years. So we're entering in a new season, and it's a different message today. So we better do something about this debt. Otherwise, we're going to be like Argentina and just reset our currency one day, and I'm running so we don't do that.
So I like exactly what you're saying. You're speaking to something that I've been talking about for years, but here's the issue, though. How as president, can you actually influence the Fed? Because this is one of and Cindy Lake has brought this up for years. And so how, again, I'm just going to ask you directly, how as president can you affect that? You spoke to it very well as a businessman.
So you've got
control the Fed.
The monetary policy is the Fed. But the fiscal policy is the president, the budgetary process, the appropriations process in Congress. It's so hard to have good monetary policy when you have horrible fiscal policy. Because what they're trying to do is repair this problem, which is $2 trillion in debt this year alone, going to be that more than that next year. So what are they supposed to do? Their goal is to try and stop inflation, keep it. Now, it's out of hand. But at the end of the day, you got to control what you can control, which is this. So how would I control this is the big question. Right. And that would be looking right into the camera, talking to you and me and our families, what President Trump did with Twitter, me staring in the camera and telling American people, here's what debt has done to our nation. Here's what it's going to do to our nation. Here's how come the U.S. dollar is at risk today. In fact, it's being used 20% less across the international trade than it was just 10 years ago. Over 30 nations are joining Brazil, Russia, and India, and China today to try and do just that. We better start paying attention to this because the next 5 or 10 years could look really bleak. I think there's a perfect storm we're headed into. And the Fed has got its arms tied right now. Jerome Powell already announced 3 interest rate cuts for next year, or this year, 2024. Now, when I grew up studying business, the Fed used to be independent. You would never hear of interest rate cuts a year in advance, 6 months in advance. They would keep it quiet to the vest. Now they're a political arm of Joe Biden and the Democratic Party. So they've become political. I think this just to try and goose the economy in time for the election in November. So the way to control the Fed is to control fiscal policy. You have wisdom again, speak to America about the challenges we're having, and actually come up with a plan to do it and still grow the country, which we have one.
Under Joe Biden, he has a student debt relief program that he's trying to implement. Would you still push that, or would you abandon it?
No, you have to get rid of it. And here's why. So I've done a few of these town halls with college students, and I've started off, I think I was at Iowa State, or I've been at New England College in New Hampshire, and I've asked the students, I'm like, how many guys would like for me to, as president, to get rid of all your student debt? I mean, one by one, hands go up, boom, 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 boom. Because that's a great thing, right? You're staring at 50,000, 100,000. I mean, it's a great day to have to think about it. And I said, okay, now how many of you guys would agree that we should do it next year too? Because that's only fair for next year's students to get it. And they're like, yeah. Now, what about the year after them? Is that fair for them too? Yeah. So then we just kind of extrapolate this for the next 20 years. Now, here's what this means. Here's another $500 billion. And what this means is now you got to pay for it. Now, how do you do that? Well, you print money, you roll out the printing presses from the U.S. Treasury, we borrow money, increases money supply, increases inflation, increases now the difficult ability to buy houses today. So now you're 30 years old, you can't buy a house. How many of you guys now still want me to pay off your debt? Hands went down. So when we start telling them the truth about what it does, and the long term, here's the reality. 50% of young people under 25, you know where they're living today? With mom and dad.
At home. Yep.
50%
playing video
So they
games.
went to college, wanted to be financially independent. Hey, I'm going to get a job. When I graduated college at 22 years old, I had a job, I had a car, I had an apartment by myself, and I had money left over at the end of the month. I wasn't wealthy, but I did what I wanted to do, and they can't do that today.
I know.
Very few can. So no is the answer. And we can tell them that, and they'll embrace it. Once you explain it to them, the real cost of it.
Well, let's talk about marijuana. Okay. And I think, 36 states already adopted marijuana in their states for either recreational medication or recreational or both.
Next question. I'm in a marijuana state, and you want me to ask you? I'm a conservative pastor, a Christian, and you want me to talk to you about marijuana?
Yes.
Golly, and I've never inhaled it, I promise you. And I just don't even know what to say about it right now.
Now play the saxophone. We'll just play it.
I mean, I just don't even know what to say. But so
it helped a lot of veterans that suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder.
Sure.
And right now, the state can't put any of this money in banks because it's not federally regulated. So, as president, are you gonna make it federally regulated so they could put the money in the banks, and so the country could tax that money and
you're asking a question that I don't know. I need to learn. I need to learn more about this.
Prohibition was illegal at one time too, and look at it now, right? Right,
it's too prolific. But I think that you're asking a question I need to learn more about. I'm not a huge fan.
Put me on your administrative staff.
Let's do it. I'm not a huge fan of legal marijuana. All right, now I can understand medical marijuana for uses, but the problem that I have with it is that it's gotten so loose that anybody comes up with a crazy bad day, and all of a sudden they get a prescription for it. So is it really for veterans for medical uses? And I would say I could understand that, but for probably half of the uses, are they really truly medical needs, or is it just somebody getting
glaucoma.
High? Somebody getting high. So and I do think that a lot of these precursor drugs, so to speak, and again, I'm no expert at it, but is it a gateway drug to others? Would I enjoy seeing a bunch of 18-year-olds hanging around just getting high? Not really. Do I think that's in their best interest of their life? Not really. So I think there's a lot of other things we could do, but should with a doctor's prescription, should it be allowed? I think it's probably more of a state decision. I would probably have to lean on that a little bit. That may be a bailout answer, but right now I'd have to lean there and then say, let me learn more. You know,
because I consider alcohol to be a gateway.
I would agree with that too.
But everybody drinks. Oh well, not everybody, but majority of the populace drink. And I think that's a gateway drug.
No, I would agree.
And we had prohibition back in the days, and look how this country has reformed.
So I'm one of those guys, even with alcohol, you know, as I just mentioned, you know, my brother was killed by somebody that was out drinking and drunk, and he was high on other drugs as well.
Oh, wow.
And one of my best friends died of alcohol. And I used to drink in college, and when I gave my life to the Lord in 1992, you know, I just felt like the Lord is like saying, hey, it's not for you. Mm-hmm. Now, I've had, I think, a half a glass of wine, which I almost got drunk when when we had it. So it's not like a religious thing for me. It's more of like it was personal to me. But I have seen the pain that alcohol has caused, you know, in people's lives, and it's addictive. It can be, and so you know, these are things that we have to walk through. So I need to learn a little bit more about it.
And one of the reasons why I brought this up, Mr. Binkley, is because the dispensary has nowhere to put the money, and it's best to tax the state and get federal money to help with different programs than to not have it at all, because it's here.
Right.
It's not going anywhere.
Right.
You got about 36 states already adopted it. I mean, it's not going anywhere. It's going to be more and more and more and more, whether we like it or not.
Right.
So might as well we just jump on it and make sure it's done the right way and start putting it in the banks and to help veterans that have post-traumatic stress disorder.
Well, again, can't give you a good solid answer on it. So
he doesn't like the marijuana.
I need to probably dive into more and tell me more what it does and the benefits of it and how it truly helps. Is that the only thing that can help? You know, I don't know the answer to that.
Better than all these pharmaceuticals.
That's probably
pills that's
arguable. You know,
yeah.
So
the opioids and all that stuff.
Yeah.
that are killing vets.
You know, I think you know what we're looking at when we look at our, you know, as I'm running for president, there's so many things that I want to speak to holistically that have to do with our national security, have to do with you know, my goodness, why is there so many, and why do we have so many veterans with this issue? It's because they've been involved, many of them in endless wars, some of them we shouldn't have been in to begin with. How do we as a nation prevent us from going into wars so this isn't a continual problem for the next 50 years, 100 years? So I'm running like thinking this, I have got to steward, and we as a nation better steward the U.S. dollar, because when we're strong financially and we have a strong president, you know what? We don't go to war as often as we do when we have a weak economy and we have a weak president. So you go back to 2009. When does Putin jump over on Crimea? Well, we come out of the 2007 and 8 financial crisis where our economy's weak, Obama's weak, Putin moves in. When does he move in again? Well, the economy's weak, the foundation's weak. Biden runs out of Afghanistan. Next thing you know, Putin's in again. So, you know, these end up being, you know, precursors, I think. So that's the reason I think, you know, Reagan was strong. He wanted a strong defense, but it was to stay out of war. It wasn't just to go headlong in it. So I'm one of these people that looks at our economy and says the U.S. dollar's strength is very important to not only our national security, but to our leadership across the globe. And then how do we raise up people that want to be a part of the military and that truly want to do it for the right reasons, knowing you're not going to have a president that's going to throw them into an endless war. But if they do go to the war, we're going to have an exit strategy. We're going to have the way to get out. If they do go in, it's going to be because we would put our sons there and we'd go there ourselves. And if I wouldn't put my sons in there, I wouldn't send your sons there. And so I think we've got to get back to, you know, this who are we as a nation again, and get out of the geopolitical, you know, garbage from it and doing it for the wrong reasons. We have a lot of leaders in there that might be doing it for many other political or business reasons. Obviously, war has been, for generations, been used for, you know, greed and many other reasons other than holistic reasons. And so I'm one of these people that steps back higher and says, how do we be strong? How do we make right decisions? What does this mean then we can actually recruit people that want to be a part? Mm-hmm. Because they're looking at our military today or the veterans today going, you know, wow. Not only do they not have adequate, you know, medical care or whatever it may be, we
clothing, storage allowances,
food, shelter. I mean, they're not. I mean, I saw this. I saw this with my granddad. He served in He was in the Navy. He was a pilot, so he's passed away in 2008. And I saw him battle for 20 or 30 years. After a plane accident, he had trouble with his vision for years, decades. He'd wear these big, thick glasses. It kept him from working good. And I saw him fight for 20, 30 years just to get VA benefits. So there's a lot we do now, my dad and I do, for veterans because we saw my granddad not get proper care. So, when I say this, I don't want you to think I'm tongue-in-cheek about medical marijuana, whatever is needed. I would actually want to have a team of people to revamp the whole VA. What does it really need to look like? People that I trust and people that are experienced in face-to-face dealing with it. Say, hey, let's make the right decisions, and I'd commit to that.
So let me ask you this real quick. Sorry, Steve, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I got something that I just wanted to ask right away. Okay, so how do you deal with one of the things that I find frustrating that we're asking most of our candidates now, whether it's local or on a national level. So we ask a lot of questions about morality. You can't legislate morality. So you brought up some really good points about, I think, your overall general foreign policy. But how frustrating is it for you to run for president and be asked these morality questions as a pastor? What role does government play in morality and legislating morality? Because Steve, and I'm sorry, Steve, I don't mean to speak for you, but Steve and I have had this discussion several times when it comes to that. Republicans are stay away from my money, but yet we'll legislate your morality.
I think it's important that we distinguish too what is morality.
Or what is the role of government in morality?
we have a tendency to be very selective about what laws we want to enforce. Sure. So it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's speeding or whether it's the Immigration and Naturalization Act at the border. Do we enforce it or not, or do we just leave it alone? So is that immoral? Or is it immoral to allow, drugs or whatever? So there's a definition of this that is, I think when we have to go back to what's the rule of law, is it a law? We're a nation of laws. We probably need to start there. And then, these other things are personal decisions, of which sometimes they're moral, amoral, depending on your faith and who you are. You could ask one person, is this immoral? Well, if it's not against the law of our land, our country, or city, or state, and it's not hurting anybody else, well, that's called freedom. In all likelihood. And I may not personally agree with it, but that's not my job to be your moral compass in some of these areas. And so I've talked to a lot of people that I disagree with. I've had college students that are transgender, they're atheist, and they will talk to me, Ryan, you're a Christian. Are you trying to impose your Christian faith on me as an atheist? And I'm like, listen, I want you to know this. I would die for you and your right to be an atheist here in our country. Why? Because our Constitution, so let's go back to law. Our Constitution says that you have the right to a freedom of religion and the express right to express that. And so that's no religion at all. So I've got to be able to fight for that Constitution, be willing to fight for your belief in that. And you know what they did is they're like, oh, wow, you and I can hang out now. And they wanted my photo afterwards. And it didn't matter whether it was transgender. I'm like, listen, I respect you. Right. If you want to live your life that way, I respect you. Now, do I think it's the best decision for you? I personally don't, but you know what? If you're an adult and you want to live that, I respect you. But this is the only thing I'm asking back in return. I've got 2 daughters that if they're in high school or college and they want to compete in sports, I'm asking for the same respect back. Can they compete fairly with somebody of their sex? Would you respect that back? And you know what they said? Yes, they could get it. And they were ready for this, hey, let's drop the swords here, because I don't have to be the morality police, but there is some things that's just right and wrong that I think we can get to, and I think we can change the tenor of the leadership of our nation to focus on some of these most important things. Because what can we agree on? We can agree to help the poor together. We can agree on, boy, inflation stinks. Inflation is hurting everybody. Why don't we focus on some things like that together? And then if you're atheist or transgender or whatever, we could do some of these things together and get our nation back.
When Mike Pence was running for VP the very first time, and I asked him, I had a survey of about 145,000 veterans that were incarcerated in state and federal prisons. And one of the reasons a lot of these vets were incarcerated, there was no program in place that would exit the veteran out of military life into civilian life. So especially combat vets who have seen the worst of the worst, and there was nothing to guide them and there was nothing to help them. So when they're in the civilian populace and they lose it or whatever happened or whatever took place that make them break law, assault battery or whatever, we talked about to have some type of treatment program instead of an incarceration program.
Absolutely.
I mean, we train these men and women to be fighters for our country, and then we turn around and some of it probably is their doing, but a lot of it is our country's doing as well. And we turn around and we incarcerate them.
Right.
So we have about 100. Back then, it was about 145,000 veterans that was incarcerated in state and federal prisons. So, as president of these United States, what would you do to help these veterans have more treatment than incarceration? And let me just add one little caveat to it. There, in some jurisdictions in our country, such as this one in Clark, we have a veterans court to help veterans, treatment if they break a law and stuff of that nature. What would you do for a whole wide nation to make sure that we don't keep locking up our vets?
Well, I think so. A lot of things you do as president's legislation, and a lot of things is leadership. Some of these issues are statewide decisions, but doesn't mean you can't lead. So there's a lot of things I could talk to you about too, if I want to dive into education and urban America stuff, which I'd love to talk to you about. Sure. And this is one of them as well. I had a chance to visit with some leaders in Missouri, and they've got, not the whole state, because even their state is broken up in the way they do this thing, but there's a good portion of the state where they take people into 3 different tracks. One was the violent crime track, and that was incarceration. The other was mental health track. And there's not enough states that now invest into mental health. And I don't know what you're doing here in Nevada, but so many states have pulled funds away because they didn't have the beds and they didn't have this and whatever it is. But we have seen now an increase in homelessness all over the nation. I'm sure it's increased here quite a bit. 12% rise in homelessness. So this is veterans though, but this applies to everyone. I mean, if somebody's got a drug addiction, and the other track was drug addiction. Mm-hmm. So shouldn't we have a track for, violent crimes, for drug addiction, and so for something that's clearly a mental health issue? And what they did in Missouri is they put them on different tracks. Because if they took everybody that was on a drug addiction, or mental health issue, and they just put them in incarceration, as soon as they got out, you know what happened?
They go right back.
They go right back. The same treatment, and the same thing happened again and again. And then they go back to incarceration. Well, you've been here again. Now you get more time. So we've sitting here and just done nothing but domino or snowball this effect, as opposed to figuring out, hey, what do they really need? And we've probably all had friends that were on this addictive track or mental health track, and we may know too many. And there's a spectrum of that. Sometimes it's severe. Sometimes it's minor. Sometimes it's a little bit of help that's needed. Sometimes it's a lot. As I mentioned, I lost a good friend that was due to this addiction track, and I couldn't quite help him get the help he needed. But there is a moment where we've got to decide, this incarceration track is not a one size fits all. This is not what we're doing today. It's not working. And once we recognize that, then we truly empower states and probably lead this way. Hey, states, Nevada, Texas, get it together. Let's do something right, and that's the way I would lead. Now, there's probably not going to be a national law that says, all right, everybody does this nationally, because I believe states should have a lot of say-so. I want to get this out to the states more so than try and bring everything and have a bigger U.S. government. So philosophically, that's the way I would lead, but I would lead that way.
So let me ask you this question, and just piggyback on exactly what Steve said. So I really like what you're saying, but can you define for me how exactly you feel about the 10th Amendment? Because when you're talking about states' rights, that's specifically the 10th Amendment that handles that. And then kind of second part of that question would be, every year most presidents have a governor's council. So they invite all the governors from all 50 states and commonwealths to come in and kind of explain to them, like, overall what they would kind of like to see what the national problems are, but not telling them what they can and cannot do. But what would you do? Would you continue that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the president.
And then what would you tell some
I
of
would
these
go further than
governors?
that.
Yeah.
I would go further than that. I mean, as president, I would do a lot of things different. I mean, I actually think this. Wouldn't it be great to not just go to the governors and bring all the governors in, but hey, make some visits to our greatest and biggest cities and meet with the business leaders and the church leaders of Las Vegas and go, listen, what's happening in your town? And give some inspiration and leadership thoughts to why don't we own our city? Why don't we give back to figuring out what the hurting issues are? I was in Chicago last year, and we had a chance to visit. This is an incredible facility. It's a $35 million privately owned facility. And the people in the city thought, you know what? We've got a problem. And the problem is this. These 4 school districts in downtown Chicago are doing a poor job of educating our children, getting the results we want. So they decided to invest in an after-school program. And it's a 501c3, it's nonprofit, privately done. They may have had a little bit of grant money with some land, but it's a $35 million building, privately raised. But they bring in 1,700 kids a day, busing kids from these toughest school districts in there, teaching them now after-school programs, people like you and me, mentoring them a couple hours a week, some of them sports, some of them reading, writing, math, STEM. And they have a 50% higher graduation rate just by doing that. So one thing I would do is I would come to Nevada and go, hey, do you see what they're doing there? Is that happening here? Let's do more of that here. Where are the 5 school districts that have a 60% graduation rate? Where are they? Do you know where they are? And do we have community centers that we're investing into? Let's talk to some of the billionaires here in the city. Would you give a little bit to that? Let's quit asking the government to do this. This is one of the things that my message is this. I'm a Christian. Jesus never said, hire the government to take care of your neighborhood. He said, you love your neighbor. So who's our neighbor? And then he began to define it. Well, it talks about this guy that's laying on the side of the road, or he talks about the most hurting, or who's the least in society. He talks about those that are in prison. He talks about those that are hurting, those that didn't have clothes or food. And I think if we as a nation can start, this is not a government program, but I can start saying, can we do this here in Las Vegas? Can I do it in Dallas, Texas? Can we do it in Chicago, Los Angeles? Owning our city. Can we start seeing people? What programs do we need? What kind of education tracks do we need? What type of mentoring tracks do we have? What do we need for veterans? Let's figure it out. Now that's some of the things you asked about, I would call it an off-ramp coming out of the military. I could see that being a federal issue. That needs to be, we need to learn what that is, what kind of mentoring that is. I think I could see that. But a lot of these other things, once we're here, my goodness, let's keep it local. If it's not in the Constitution, let's don't make federal government bigger. Right. Okay. So, but if it is in the Constitution, and I think there's a lot of areas to cut, but anything for the veterans, we do not need to cut. I'm going to cut a lot of things, but I will commit to you, I will not cut anything for veterans, and we need, in fact, to increase it all the more. There's a lot of waste that we have, but we better take care of those that loved our country the most. Could
you tell me what's going on with our country? You got, and let me just throw some examples, and it's very confusing to me. And I've been in this country ever since I was 6 years old. And no, I wasn't born here because I would love to run for president myself. We need to change that Constitution.
I vote for you, Steve.
There's a lot of things we need to change in the Constitution.
we need to amend it and say if you lived in this country for 30 years, you can run. You don't have to be naturally born anymore.
Unless you're Schwarzenegger.
See, he would have ran for president. You have refugees being treated better than veterans. Okay, you have an open border. You have states have sanctuary cities. You have cities putting illegal immigrants in their schools and denying education to American students. You have this one Marine in New York who was on the train. I'm sure you heard about it. It was in all news. Subdued a guy that was threatening folks and end up killing him, and he's indicted. The Marine is, and then you have these 3 or 4 illegal immigrants that beat up the cop, beat up those cops, and they give them bus tickets out of there. What the hell is going on with this country? I'm sorry to use hell because I know you're a man of God, but what the hell is going on with this country? I feel like it's so ass backwards. It's the Marine Corps is not the Marine Corps that I was in back in '85.
Right.
It is not the way it is anymore. You have a military that's being depleted. Right. That nobody wants to join anymore. You got people that don't want to be cops anymore because of what's going on. What is going on with this country? Because I think I'm in the Twilight Zone sometimes.
You are. Well,
you have a Twilight Zone song you could play?
So, Steve, you set me up here. So we came out with this message when I announced. I called it the Way to Freedom.
Yeah.
And what it was this. Why are we going $2 trillion in debt every year? Why are we giving free tax money to the biggest pharmaceutical in the Republican Party? Tax Cut and Jobs Act. President Trump did this. Love many things. Don't want to step on too many toes here. But when we give big pharma tax breaks, and I own a small business, I pay 21%. Big pharma pays 0 or 5%. Amazon paid 6%. We're going to protect these guys, but hurt small businesses, make them pony up. That's ass backwards too. So everything is like this, and this whole message is about why are we doing what we're doing? Why is the border wide open? We haven't had a border policy, a law to protect our border or an immigration plan 50, 60 years. So we haven't really, we haven't done anything on it. Why is it so divided? We called it the Way to Freedom. That if we focus on the border, do the right thing, focus on healthcare, focus on education. I tried to pick some things that impacted us all. The inflation crisis today. And then people ask me, somebody said, well, Ryan, that acronym for the Way to Freedom sounds like WTF. And so we talked about that because a lot of people are saying, hey, where's the freedom? Or what in the freedom's going on? And that's what you're asking. What in the freedom is happening to our country? And I think this, we've lost, the Bible talks about this. So it talks about, in our own wisdom, we became fools. It talks about the judgments of God that come on a nation when our nation leaves God. So we're a nation that's tried to kick God out of every area of society. Now, I don't know whether you're Christians or not, so I'm just going to tell it.
I'm Catholic.
We have kicked God out of every part of our society, and they'd do it more if we'd let them. They would take the 10 Commandments off. If you got a $1 bill, we still got in God we trust on it. I mean, they want to have a digital currency probably just so they can get rid of that slogan. But they want to remove God and the name of God from every single part of our society. And then we wonder, well, where's God? Why are we like this? Well, why don't we just think about it for a second? When we allow human trafficking to come into our nation and not secure our border, and we allow children to be stolen, and we allow drugs to kill 100,000 people are dying every year on fentanyl from the southern border. And the Republicans say we want to secure the border, and Democrats want some sort of pathway to work registration or citizenship or whatever, voters.
Oh, they want it free for all.
They want it free ever. So, but there's no way these two guys are going to meet in the middle. And we just saw this. They're not gonna figure out a solution because why? Because it'll give a political win to somebody, and they're not willing to do it. So you know what we're willing to do? We're going to let 100,000 more people die this next year, which is 2,000 people a week, which is 9/11 happening every week. But yet, because it's not politically expedient, or because I'm going to give somebody a win, or I might be perceived as lost, I'm going to let 100,000 people die. Then I'm going to go to heaven one day and go, well, God, that was not really my fault, was it? Well, if you're the president of the United States, if you're in Congress, if you're Mike Johnson, you're a leader, you're signing up to be a senator or a congressman, I'm telling you what, there's going to be some truth that comes your way one day, and there's accountability you have to lead. So I'm asking God, what do we need to do? Well, the only way to change this is to have an entire generation of statesmen and women that fear God, have wisdom, want to do the right thing, and aren't doing it for political reasons, but want to run for office, state, local, national level, to change our nation, to get it back to be one we could be proud of again. Aside from that, it's turned into a social media platform for some of these senators and congressmen and leaders, where they're more interested in being insult artists and seeing how many likes they can get, as opposed to truly serving our nation. So when's that going to happen? Well, when enough God-fearing people want to do the right thing. And I would say this: whatever we do with the border, if I just stop right there, we better do it with the fear of God in our mind, the rule of law. Yeah, President Biden, he could stop it today, but there's a lot of things that we need. We need more money. You know who's got money? Congress. And the only way to get money from Congress is to figure something out that works for America.
But where is Congress going to get that money? They're going to get it from Steve and I.
Well, no, but at the end of the day, there's some things that's worth the money. Listen, we've got so much wasteful garbage. We're giving the money to right now? We're giving tax breaks of hundreds of $billions to Big Pharma because we think that's a good idea, but we can't spend $20 to $30 billion to secure our border. So yeah, I'll cut some other things. I won't take it from you. I'll take it from Big Pharma. Is that fair? And then we'll decide. We'll get it from somebody else that doesn't need it.
But to be perfectly honest with you, sir, Big Pharma, they're actually responsible for getting most of our former presidents elected. And campaigns are expensive.
They're not giving me any money.
Campaigns are expensive, though. I mean, to be president of the United States, it's ridiculous. But now, if you don't raise $600 million, probably not going to be a viable candidate. Where do you get that money from?
We're going to start right here, right now. Pass the hat. I'm a pastor, so we can do this.
Hey, you're impressing me so far.
Listen,
I don't know about
I'm not
kicking
running
down any more money because Biden's taking most of Biden
I was
this
at
year.
Turning Point speaking at their event in Florida, I think in July last year. So these young students came by to me and asked me to sign a no big tech pledge. Ryan, as presidential candidate, would you sign a no big tech pledge? And I'm like, yeah, I'll sign it, but can you carve in and no big pharma also? And I'll guarantee I'll be the only one on the list. So the problem is you hit it. They are paying money. President Trump got $2.9 million from Big Pharma. Biden got 3 times that, almost $9 million from Big Pharma. 2/3 of Congress, Big Pharma is buying into their campaign. And you know what we're doing back? We're giving them 10 and 15-year patent extensions that no other nation does. So Canada can buy drugs for 28 cents on the dollar that we do. And we think that we're doing the right thing. We have lost our minds. And so until we want to just address put all the cards on the table, our country's never going to be solvent again until we address Big Pharma, because it's 4 times as big as the military. With 17 cents of every dollar that comes in GDP goes to healthcare. 30 years ago, it was about 6 cents of the dollar. So we're letting it take over our country, and that's one of the things we got to do. But anyway, the corruption is all along the table. But it's going to take leadership. And I'm not running to try and beg money from some organization. I'm really carrying a prophetic, voice in my heart that says our nation better wake up. We're going bankrupt. The next generation is not going to be able to buy a house the way you and I did. They're not going to be able to borrow money for a small business. The division's so strong. The goal of each party is to see the other party fail rather than see America succeed. So, President Trump is telling Mike Johnson how to vote. Mike Johnson said, "Oh, I'm in charge." I laughed when he said that. First of all, love you, Mike Johnson. I'm praying for him, right? But every time I've been to my wife and I've had to tell her I'm in charge, you know what happened? I really wasn't in charge. So, this is where we're at today. If we have to tell people we're in charge,
right,
we're not in charge.
True.
And so, let's just be honest. And so, but we better start making some decisions that get some things done. And we've got a border plan that does that. I think it does. We could dive into that. But at the end of the day, it's about leadership. When's the last time we had a president that transcended from being the president of their party to truly being the president of the United States, to where collectively most of Americans said, that's my president?
And what is your border plan?
Seal it, $30 billion, coast to coast, wall, towers, technology, people.
Would you mess with Texas?
What?
Would you mess with Texas and tell them to cut their barbed wire down?
No, of course not.
Okay.
He wouldn't need to, though. We'd have it already secure. And it needs to be funded, though. And now the only way to get funds, though, is Congress. And the only way to get Congress to do it is to do this. Probably, I don't know, 1/3 of the people that have come, almost everybody under Biden's open border have to go. Right. But we've got some people that own business, that have been here for 30 years, came here when they were 2. we better come up with a solution that works for a lot of people that have been here, even though they came here legally. My plan charges them fines for 12 years, and then they get to the back of the line if they've been here, for a long time. But it's a sensible plan. It's one that's strong and gets something done.
So you're running for president of the United States, and you have to campaign in 50 states, and you have to campaign in territories. All the territories that have Congress have a member of Congress, like the U.S. Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, the American Samoa. How much money have you raised to conquer all that?
Not a lot. We've spent I'm primarily self-funded. We have 82,000 different donors. But I probably, we've probably spent 8 or 9 million, I don't know the exact number, in this campaign so far. This has always been about this message. We need an economic revival. We need a spiritual revival. I've always known that I'm going up against, the biggest Goliath in the world, right? But I'm not running against Trump. I've tried to tell him this in no uncertain terms. If they get this to him, I would help him if he would listen to what I'm saying. But he's not focused on the two biggest things that I think are so critical to us, and that's our debt and our division. And it would take a different moment, I think, for him to go, you know what, I think we need to pay attention to that. We can't just grow our way out of debt. I'm all for growing our way out, but people have been saying we're going to grow our way out of debt for 30 years, and it hasn't happened. So I don't believe it will happen. I want to drill too. We'll drill like crazy. We'll become energy independent, but that's not going to be enough. It's hit a tipping point. It's too big. So we've got wasteful spending it's corrupt, so we can stop it. But I would help him in any way I could, but I feel led to keep speaking this, and I will keep speaking it until God tells me to stop, because something's truly wrong. I've done over 200 town halls. 200 in Iowa, New Hampshire, Texas, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, here. Everybody says not everybody, most people say this, something's missing. And even you can go to the diehard Trump, diehard Democrat, if I get one-on-one and they're honest enough, they look, something's wrong. Something's wrong with America, something's missing in the message, something's missing in the leadership, something's missing in this connection. And what it is this. This is my polling of 200 town halls. People don't trust leaders today. They don't trust Washington. They don't trust any of our leaders. None of them. In aggregate. And until we get our trust back, this is what's hit American pride. It's at an all-time low for people that say, I'm proud to be an American. And this is how come military can't recruit today. People don't. When's the last time you heard of college students go, I'm proud to be an American?
We can't even unify the Republican Party.
Yeah.
We got to start there.
So
so how do I get there? I keep shouting this message until enough people go, dang it, I'll do that. I'll get in behind that. I'm asking Nevada. You want to get behind? Do you like the same old thing? Do you want 4 more years of just a bare knuckle fist fight and going to town? And a lot of people are in for it. Like, heck yeah, let's just fight like hell and let's go for it. Well, I'm like, okay.
It's not, with all due respect, it hasn't been 4 years. I mean, we've gotten, I think as soon as Clinton got elected, and I'm not blaming Bill Clinton, but when he beat Bush Sr., ever since then, that's when, and I'm a pretty young guy. But that's when I started seeing the divide really get really bad, where Republicans, even if you were a Democrat, you had the greatest idea on earth, you were the enemy, and vice versa. It's just gotten worse.
But go back to that time, though. So Reagan had Tip O'Neill. They argued, they fought. Reagan had an ability to transcend our party.
He worked with Tip, though.
Now, then you look at Clinton. Now, listen, I remember I was in college, and out of college, everybody that was Republican couldn't stand Clinton. Right. But what did he do? He pivoted. He actually pivoted.
Especially in 96.
He worked with Newt Gingrich with Contract with America. Bill Clinton was the last president to balance the budget in the United States. I mean, to put together a balanced budget. But he did it because Newt Gingrich held his hands to, but they had to because they lost the House.
Worked with Trent Lott too.
And so you know what they did. We haven't done it since then. We've gotten away from this thought. It's like this in the Republican Party. You said this. right? The Republican Party's divided. Why is it divided? It's divided because if you don't agree with me 100% on everything, we are not friends.
You're an enemy. Huh?
You are. If you don't agree wholeheartedly on every single thing,
How many marriages are like that?
on everything, then we're not even friends. And
How many marriages are like that?
And so, like, golly, I'm looking at our party and go, is that what it takes? Do I have to repeat every mantra the exact way everybody else does for me to be a Republican? And listen, most Republicans know that's not right. And everybody needs to see this, that conflict should be good. You should be able to disagree with me and just go, okay, let's go grab a beer together and let's figure this thing out. And you know what? I guarantee all three of us could come together with a solution on the border by midnight tonight.
I could come with one like in 5 minutes.
But why can't the Republican Party get there? The Republican Party can't even stand up. You saw it. Mitch McConnell, these guys and senators, they come up with something and it's half baked. But you know
what? Because I know we're running out of time. I think one of the ways to get rid of some corruption in Washington is to have term limits for the Senate and Congress. Because if we had term limits, we wouldn't have a Biden today, and that's for sure.
And we wouldn't have Mitch McConnell.
If the President of the United States have term limits, why can't a United States Senator and a U.S. Congressperson have term limits? Why is that?
The only solution is that what I said earlier, it's going to take a generation of statesmen and women to rise up and run for office that are willing to vote themselves out of office.
Yeah.
It's going to take 2/3 of Congress and the Senate to get that done.
So as President of the United States, would you champion such legislation?
Absolutely.
Okay.
But like I said earlier, it's going to take decades of leaders rising up and go, you know what, this is the right thing.
Okay. Well, Mr. Binkley, we could probably go on for hours. I know I can, but I know we don't have that much time. Is there anything that you want to say that we haven't covered?
Yeah, I do want to say this, and I may have mentioned it briefly. The Republican Party has got a big challenge. We're not winning. When you go back and look at the last 3 general elections, you look at what's happening in our country. We're not connecting to the fastest growing segments of our country, which is urban America. College students were losing, 65% vote for Democrat. The multicultural centers of our big cities, they're not voting Republican. The Republican Party does not have a message for them. If you're on the lower income scale of America, why would they vote Republican? They don't think we're at the table with them. If you and I walk to downtown, the toughest parts of Las Vegas today, and we poll 300 people, you ask them, which party's at the table with you? What are they going to say?
Well, typically, it's starting to tip a little bit, but typically you're right, though. Large urban areas typically do vote Democrat.
So why? We don't have a message that connects with them.
Well, the party...
let me just say this real quick. I feel like this. I don't have any money to give them. But we can start this vocational trade movement. I can start a volunteer movement like the Peace Corps was in the 60s and 70s and say, hey, listen, I'm going to ask hundreds of thousands of college students that if you want to change the world, they want to change America and you hate politics, which they all do, forget voting for my party or me, but why don't you join me in a movement to mentor a 3rd grader on how to read? Let's start a mentoring movement in America that would challenge the Peace Corps of the 60s and 70s. Let's get college students that want to change the world. Let's get them engaged for a few hours a week. They spend 5 hours a day on their phone. They can spend a few hours a week, right, mentoring a young person. Let's start vocational trades again. Let's get kids ready for life. So my vision is for urban America and for kids all over. Let's get you ready for life. And my vision is when you get out of high school, you're going to go down 3 tracks. 1, you're better prepared for college. 2, if you don't want to go to college, and please don't if you don't feel like you're supposed to, get involved in a vocational trade where you can earn a family-supporting living wage. Or 3, go to the military. So you're not just hanging around at the house, living with your parents, playing video games. Those days are over. You need to get to work. We need to start a work culture again. That would be my last message for Nevada and America. This is my vision for our country. And let's don't be Republicans that are relegated to the suburbs and rural America, which is what we're a party of now. We're not a party of the big cities. We're just not. We got kicked out. Look at the electoral map for the last 5 elections. I'm from Texas. We lost Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, Austin, Fort Worth for the first time in 65 years. And they weren't stolen. It's because we didn't connect to people. And we better connect to them. And we better show them a way. And so this is what God told me. He said, Ryan, if you're expecting the poor to vote for you, when the Democrats are offering them free health care, free food, free whatever, he said, and you're expecting them to vote for you, he said, you're being foolish unless you're willing to lay down your life and be a bridge for them to walk on. And show them the way. Here's how you can be a success. And when we do that, I think we'll get our country back.
Well, you know, the Republican Party is not embracing the black and the brown at all. And you have so many black and brown folk that would love to join the Republican Party.
Absolutely.
But there are a lot of them are closet Republicans. They don't come out. They don't stand up because they have no support, because the party is not embracing them. So why should they run to them? And that's the problem with the Republican Party.
So you hit it. So I'm a pastor also. I pastor a multicultural church in Dallas, Texas. I've been a part of multicultural churches since 1994. I've got Democrats in my church. They're Christians. They love God. They said, Ryan, I'm not a Democrat because I believe in this far left agenda. He said, but if the Republicans had a message for the poor or for the immigrant, even legal immigration today. So I've got people in my church. They're from Nigeria, Ghana, Zimbabwe. They are business leaders, attorneys, engineers, doctors. They go, Ryan, the Republican Party doesn't care about legal immigration. It shouldn't take 20 years for one of their relatives to get over here. And that's the problem today. And if we address some of the needs that they have, they would vote for us. They're pro-life, they're pro-family, they're pro-work. And all we got to do is just start showing that we care. And also this, I believe this with all my heart, that we have got to start showing the black and brown community that we do care. In Iowa, there's a black and brown presidential forum for 40 years. Typically, Democrat presidential candidates have been there and they're invited to a forum. This year, the Democratic Party pulled out of the Iowa caucus. So they invited all the Republicans there. I said, yeah, sure, I'd love to be a part. They canceled it because every other Republican candidate said they didn't want to come. Mm-hmm. So if we're not willing to dive into that community, why would they want to respond back? And
I think
Ryan, sorry, nobody else wants to join.
Yeah, I've been saying that for years. Like, okay, so what's the number one rule? Like, ask a question. If you don't ask, the answer is always no. So like I've always said, when you're running for office, you ask for everyone's vote.
They don't know how Republican Party, don't know how to embrace the youth of today. Right. I forget what, there's a Gen Z. They don't know how to embrace them. I'll give you an example. I went to the RNC winter meetings over at the Horseshoe last weekend, and you know, I'm used to it. I mean, I could deal with the boring, the old white person type of deal. I could deal with that because I'm used to it. But if I brought in a young black UNLV student or a young Hispanic student, and I brought them to that RNC, they're just gonna about face and go out because they don't know how to go on their level, because they don't want that boring, because it was boring. There was nothing that would tell them run to this thing. Everything was tell them don't go.
And not only that, they would have been the only one there like that.
Exactly my point.
I've been to these meetings.
Exactly. Why does the party always dealing with these old white folk? Why is that? How come they don't embrace the young, the black, the brown, the Asian, and bring them into the party? Why is you go to any of these Lincoln Day dinners? Go to a few of them. What are you going to see? What are you going to see? You're going to see old white folk in there. That's exactly what you're going to see.
I'm 56, and I'm bringing the average age down.
I'm 56 too.
By 10 years, we're bringing the average age down.
That's what you're going to see in there.
So I've said the exact same thing. And the answer is simple as this. We've got to see people, we need to change with a changing electorate.
Or maybe they don't want to change.
You know, we better change. And the reason is because we're outnumbered today. So President Trump won 46% of the vote in 2016, 46.9% in 2020. President Reagan won 59% in 1984. We better start connecting in a different way to the growing, changing electorate of our country, or we will continue to lose. The Republican mantra, I'm a business guy. For 30 years, it's been, I need all the Republicans to go vote, and we'll win. And I'm like, that's the dumbest marketing strategy I've ever seen, because we're outnumbered. And if they all go vote, we're in trouble. We better start winning some. And Democrats have a funnel system of new voters every single year. And you know what they are? College students. Mm-hmm. And they get them within 6 months. And we don't. And so we better start addressing the needs of young people, talking about who we are, what we stand for. And this is young people today. We did young adult ministry for 16, 17 years. Young people, you could promise them they're going to be millionaires tomorrow. They don't care. They're idealists. They haven't paid taxes yet. They're idealists. They're like, if they can't take somebody that's hurting along with them on this journey of success, they're out. So we better give them vision and a purpose that they can be a part of something to help change our country for the better. And when we do, we'll grab their heart.
Well, we need to change the mindset of these Republican Party chair people.
It starts now.
Because it's very, very, very sad.
Well, this is why I'm running.
It's very sad.
I'm running for a new vision for the Republican Party. I'm running for a new vision for America. If you want something different, I'm asking Nevada, vote for someone different. If you really want something different, vote for someone different. If you want the same old thing you've got, then vote for the same old thing you used to do.
And you're on the presidential primary, right?
No, caucus.
Oh,
Thursday night.
you're on the caucus.
Me and President Trump are the only two names that can get delegates on Thursday.
You paid that $55?
I paid the 55.
Oh, hell. Jim and I could do a lot with that 55.
Let's do it.
Well, Mr. Binkley, Mark is going to zoom in on you, and you have the final say. You can invite people to the caucus to go and vote for you, your website, your email address, or whatever you want to do.
First of all, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
that.
Thank you.
for
Really
coming.
appreciate it. All right. My heart for you and our nation. You know, our nation is in trouble. We're in trouble at so many levels, economically, spiritually. And I've been carrying a dream in my heart, and it's really this, that we need an economic revival and we need a spiritual revival, and the time for it's now. We don't have 4 years to wait, because I think the economic uncertainty, the debt could cascade over in the next few years. I do think a storm is coming that we're not ready for. And I think it's a perfect storm, because the Fed can't stop inflation. They're going to try and lower rates, but it'll go back up again. And we're going to see this for the next decade. And we better save the dollar. And if we do save the dollar, we'll be strong across the globe again. And that's the only way China will listen, Russia will listen to us, is when we're strong again. But we have to be strong with each other. You've heard us talk about how do we get our culture back? Well, if we don't see the youth, if we don't see the minorities, if we don't see the hurting side of our nation, how are we going to truly be strong? And we're all one family, and at the end of the day. So I'm running for you. I'm running to stop the wealth gap from spreading. It spreads all the time, because if you don't own a home or an inflationary asset like a stock portfolio, you're losing today. And I'm running to save us all from that catastrophe. So I'm Ryan Binkley. I'd really love for you to caucus for us this Thursday night. If you're here in Nevada, show up, sign up, caucus for us. Text this out to 10 friends and say, hey, listen, I heard this guy. He's a decent guy. The bar's been lowered today. So anyway, share that with some friends. I believe God's got a moment for our nation, and it's time right now. And that's the reason I'm here. God bless you. Thank you for your time.
Well, thank you, Mr. Binkley. We really appreciate you coming out. I know this was last minute and all, but thank you.
Great to be here.
Thank you, Jim. Folks, that's Ryan Binkley, candidate for United States President. He's on your caucus ticket, and if you feel the need to vote for this man, by all means, Republicans, go do it. This is Steve Sampson and Jim Jones for Veterans in Politics. Until next time.